The reality is that nobody could hold me accountable more than I was holding myself. I was very upset with myself, disappointed in myself, but also just borrowed belief from my mom that I could still do the work that I was called to do, even though I wasn't sure what that was anymore. My mindset needed to be that I was choosing my son and not that I was stuck with him. And I was going to prove to everyone that no decision I've made is going to keep me from being the best at anything I do.
Hi, I'm your host, Reena Suri, and welcome to Thriving Changes. In this episode, Gina Watts shares a journey shaped by early responsibility, hard seasons, and the quiet work of becoming. This conversation explores what leadership looks like when it's forged through challenge, faith, and release. From knowing when to push forward to recognizing when it's time to let go, Gina reflects on how our hardest chapters can deepen the way we lead, love, and serve our communities. I hope this conversation adds value to you. Hi, welcome. Welcome to Thriving Changes. And I so appreciate the time that you've taken out to do this podcast. I am looking forward to it.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited and just grateful for the opportunity.
There's just so much to dig into your life. When we had that previous conversation, I didn't even know so much about your story. And I'm really curious to learn more. It seems like that you have lived two lives at once, especially as a young leader. You were a teen mom and you were raising a child while figuring out the future. And at the same time, you were a young leader, but you were still figuring out who you were. And so I really want to dig into your evolution from that teen mom to the leader that you became, the mother that you became, and how your leadership has evolved over the years.
That sounds great.
All
I'm
right.
excited.
So let's start with the teen. If I were to meet Gina, teenage Gina, prior to you finding out about your pregnancy, who would I meet?
Yeah. Cool. Teen Gina was definitely a go-getter. She loved being a part of different communities. So I was on sports teams. I was involved in different clubs and organizations. There was a lot that I was a part of, a lot that I got to do and was excited for. My mom was actually someone who always taught my brother and I the value of service and servant leadership. So you would have found us at church every Sunday and contributing to different acts of service throughout the community, whether it was volunteering with our church, leading different experiences for other young people, a whole bunch of different stuff. My mom always had us going and serving. I was academically, I would say I wasn't quite an honor student, but I performed pretty well. And I loved learning. I loved leaning in with my teachers. I always seemed to connect really well with the teachers that maybe other kids didn't connect with. I have no idea why, but if somebody said, "Oh, that teacher's really hard," or "I don't like that teacher," for whatever reason, I had a great relationship with them. And yeah, I would say I was a pretty well-rounded student, someone who tended to have a lot of friends and just was enjoying life for sure.
Yeah, sounds like a typical high school story, right? That kids go through at that age. I love the
Yeah.
idea that you guys were so involved with service and those values of servant leadership
Mm-hmm.
and learning that at such a young age. I think it really helps see the world differently and it
Mm-hmm.
adds so much meaning and value to life. So I love that.
Yeah.
And so, what age did you find out that you were pregnant?
Yeah, so it was my senior year of high school. I was in a relationship with a young man who had been in my life since we were probably in like second or third grade. And yeah, I found out I was pregnant just about 2 weeks after my 18th birthday and was pretty far along too. Those stories of people saying, "I just didn't know I was pregnant." I didn't know. I didn't know. The typical signs of pregnancy had not happened at all for me at that time. And it was pretty devastating news in the sense that it was disruptive to all the plans I had. I planned to go away to school with a friend. I had plans to go on senior trip with my other friends. There's all these things that we think are such important moments in our life that I had to pivot or do in a different way. And so there was a lot of feelings of disappointment, disappointing myself, disappointing my family. And so I found out I was pregnant and still was leading out the rest of my life that senior year. So I was vice president of the senior class. I held many offices in different clubs and organizations. And I remember people being very surprised that I still showed up and did all the things that I had already committed to throughout the rest of my senior year. And for me, it didn't feel weird. It just felt I already made this commitment. I just happened to now be pregnant too. So, yeah, February of my senior year, I found out I was pregnant.
So that, and you graduate probably in May, right? So
Yes,
that three
correct.
months. And how
Yep, the
long
first week
were
of
you
May.
in your pregnancy at that time?
Yeah, I had him in July. So like 4 months,
Yeah.
5 months. I was far enough along that,
So
um,
how was it at home? Like, how did you break the news? And
yeah. So my mom happened to be with me at the doctor's office when I found out. So it wasn't like I could hide it or keep it from her because it happened with her being there. I am a person of faith and I completely believe that was a God moment. That if she wouldn't have been there and I was able to make other choices, I probably would have because I was scared and I was uncertain of the future. And so, yeah, so my mom was there. I had been very sick, but nobody ever gave me a pregnancy test. And I was very honest with my doctor too, just about all the things going on in my life. And so they gave me a pregnancy test. And my mom knew right then and there. She was crying relief because she thought I was either losing my mind or I had some type of cancer because that's how often we had been to the doctors lately. My parents had been divorced since I was 7, so I went and had a separate conversation with my dad and my stepmom. Very disappointed. My grandmother at the time was still living, my paternal grandmother, again, very disappointed. And I think for them, they could not see a future where I could be a parent and achieve all of my goals and dreams. So while they were disappointed in me and my decision making at the time, they also were afraid for me. I didn't feel that way at the time. At the time, I felt dismissed or less than, like that I couldn't have a relationship with them. But I think they just had a fear for themselves. And then my mom, I think, was just like, she wanted me to believe in myself. So she believed enough for both of us. While many people, I think, thought she wasn't holding me accountable to my decisions or the actions that led to me being pregnant, I think for her, she felt like the world was going to be hard on me enough and that other people were going to be disappointed in me enough that I needed at least one person to believe in me. And she was right. The church I belonged to, I ended up leaving the church because the elders were not supportive of me being in spaces where I was serving in the church because now I was pregnant and we can't allow a pregnant girl to be endorsed by our leadership. And again, I think sometimes we say yes to a thing, a habit, or a way that we care for those in our charge based off of whatever we've known in the past and not necessarily based on what might be best for the present. And honestly, the reality is that nobody could hold me accountable more than I was holding myself. I was very upset with myself, disappointed in myself, but also just borrowed belief from my mom that I could still do the work that I was called to do, even though I wasn't sure what that was anymore. I was pretty confused. So, yeah, I had an experience of people no longer speaking to me. I had friends who their parents were like, can't speak to Gina anymore because she's one of those. And yeah, it was very isolating in some ways, but it also was very rooted and grounding in some ways because my mom was just my biggest cheerleader.
that is so heartening to hear. She
Yeah.
sounds like such a wise and grounded lady.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
I'm sure she was disappointed and all that, but to be with you at that moment, it must have meant so much to you, and what it would have taken her to think in that confusion when everybody is probably reaching out to her and advising, oh,
Oh, That's a whole maybe other podcast. Yeah, there's a whole other
episode, right?
episode of all the advice that she got and that I
Right.
got, right?
And
Yeah.
even
Hmm.
family members, now what are we going to do? What are you planning to do? And everybody has a take
Yeah.
on it. And
Yeah.
for her to weed through that noise and to
Hmm.
get grounded in that thought that I need to be there for my daughter.
It's other
Yeah,
behavior, right? It's very disorienting because if there's 100 people, 99 of them had their own opinion about what I should do other than what
right,
I did. My mom was the one who was like, Gina is still Gina. She made a decision that led to this moment, and she needs to know that she is not the sum of this mistake or of this decision, that more can happen. And because I decided to keep my son and raise him, that she knew that my mindset needed to be that I was choosing my son and not that I was stuck with him. And that allowed me to be a good mom. That allowed me to show up well for him. That allowed me to make sacrifices that some parents don't make, whether on purpose or by accident, right? That my son grew up knowing that I chose him and that I loved him and that maybe I wouldn't have picked for him to come into this world this way, but that his life was still just as important, even if I had strategically did everything possible for that
right.
moment. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's just hard for people to see. I tell you with transparency, like that's what I lived, but also there's a redeeming story in all of my relationships. Anybody that spoke with concern or maybe even ill will of me at the time, God redeemed it. Like I have a great relationship with my dad and with my stepmom. I had a great relationship with my grandmother before she died. There were a lot of people in my life who spoke a lot of things about me or over me. He even redeemed in some ways the relationship I had with the church that I grew up with and left. I didn't grow up hating the church. I love being in church, being a part of community, and also big C church, like a Christian faith, because the church is made of
Right.
people. So people will do what people do. And so I feel very fortunate to have had the experience that I had in having my son at such a young age and then also being able to raise him the way
So
that I did.
help me understand this. Has age and time helped you evolve into this mindset? And at that time, you were overwhelmed and used. And
Yeah.
how did that evolution?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's stages, right? I definitely think there are moments where I don't want to paint it like, oh, Gina got pregnant and then everything was fine.
Yeah,
No, not at all. There were definite moments where I was very down, felt very isolated. I often tell folks it's hard for me to have friendships mostly because I can't really relate to anybody because I'm usually in different stages of life than everybody that is my age or in my community. So the things that people got to do at particular phases of life I didn't get to do by choice, and there's some things I just can't get, like I can't understand, that there's just things that didn't work. So there was a lot of feelings of being isolated and misunderstood, a lot of spaces where I felt like, and it probably is there still a little bit, I became a workaholic and a performaholic because I was going to prove to everyone that no decision I've made is going to keep me from being the best at anything I do. So then I just was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it well. And I'm going to be the best at it. It wasn't always a smooth ride, but I would say this about who I've become over the years. And it goes back to my mom in some ways. My mom is a very forgiving person. She's a principled person, but she's a very forgiving person. And I'm very much of a hold accountability person. Like, you did a thing, here's the consequence. That doesn't mean I'm not forgiving. It just means like I think that there's a behavior and then there's an outcome, right? And so her model of a forgiving spirit and leading it out, not just saying I forgive someone, but actually staying in relationship with them or caring for them or serving them above and beyond the way that they actually care for and serve you. Like just living a favor, grace filled life probably helped me to be a very even person most of the time. I can be a very passionate person, but my son's father wasn't really in his life at first. And then he entered into his life when he was about 5 years old. My son knew nothing bad about his father. his father didn't exist. There wasn't a reason for us to talk about his father because he had chose not to be in his life. So my son needed to know that he has a mommy who loves him deeply and cares for him deeply. He has a nana, he has a pap, he has a grandma, he has aunts and uncles, he has family, he has people who care for him. There was no need to bring up anything. I didn't need to make up something for him to aspire to and it to be this like fake vision of who he was. And I also didn't need to degrade his father either, right? There was no reason for that. People spend so much time on who's not in the room. I nurtured a relationship for him with his dad once his dad decided to be in his life. And my son was able to make a decision about that relationship on his own. I use that as an example, not for a pat on the back, but I don't spend time thinking about or giving energy to who's not in the room or who's not for me or who's not for my son or who's not, I don't give energy to that. And I think when your posture is forgiving and is open. And honestly, it's a Christian walk thing. If I can believe that God can forgive me for all of my sin and the ways that I've lived my life, I surely can be a representation of that in human form. That it's not for me to hold necessarily that accountability or judge. It's for me to lean in with love and care. And so, because of that, over time, and I didn't always do that great, but over time, as I practiced it more and saw the fruit of it more and more, I think it developed me into a leader who could show up well for other people because I just saw it in my own life.
Oh, wow. I'm still downloading so much. But Gina, this is like what you're talking about is next level up wisdom, which is hard to find at that age. Especially when you say that I didn't feed any negativity into him about his dad. That is
Mm-hmm.
another
Mm-hmm.
level of
Mm-hmm.
thinking
Mm-hmm.
at a very spiritual level. Of course, now we know how important it is for children or for sons to have a relationship with their dad, even
Yeah.
when they come from a broken home, because it has repercussions on their future life. Now, studies have
Yeah.
proven that, but we didn't know much of it at
Mm-hmm.
that point of time. And this has evolved
Yeah.
in the last few couple of decades. But this is something that very few people can do and not be negative. And I think it comes down from your mom. I think that's something that you've
Mm-hmm.
inherited from to have
Mm-hmm.
that posture of forgiveness, of looking forward to what's next and leaning into everything
Mm-hmm.
that's happening rather than being stuck at what has happened.
Completely. I think, you know what I think too? I always say this in my family. I'm the balance of my parents. So my parents are very different. My mom definitely has a very high forgiveness spirit. My dad has a very deep loyal spirit. He's a very loyal person. He's a very hardworking person. So that also is like where the outperform people, prove people wrong thing that probably comes from my dad. I will say being the balance of the two of them helped me to lead out a life where I wasn't holding so much energy for people who aren't in the room. And what I mean by that is, and the reason why I'm underlining it a little bit more is because I would say some things we learn from our parents that form us, right? And some things we can get from them. I say this about my kids all the time. There's a part of my mom that probably wanted me to not only forgive through absentia, meaning I don't have to say anything negative. I don't have to do anything negative, but I should pursue making sure there is a relationship there. Whereas that's the part of me that's more like my dad that no, I can forgive, but I also can hold accountability, which is I don't need to say anything negative about a situation, but I also don't have to put myself in harm's way or my child in harm's way to try to make something right. And that's not necessary. And so I do think having the balance of both of my parents' personalities, as well as being very principled and disciplined in some of the ways that I think and operate, has allowed me to just care for people deeply and passionately, but then also like release people, release them into whatever they need to be, whoever they need to be. And I'm okay that it doesn't have to be me
Yeah,
that's a part of that, which is disorienting for people because some people think you like just threw them away. And that's not the case at all. I just, I release you. I release you.
it's so beautiful to hear that. But it must have not been easy, Gina, going back to school.
Mhm.
What was your support system like? You had your mom. who was such a strong
Yeah.
support system. But other than that,
Yeah.
of course, you felt isolated at your church, you felt isolated at school with your friends. That's a lot to
Hmm.
digest. So, other than your mom, was there anybody else?
Yeah. So her sister and brother-in-law, who actually live next door to her, my aunt and uncle, also helped me raise my son Christian. I was able to go to graduate school. I went to college and I went to graduate school, so I had them as support. They definitely helped raise him. I would say I also was just fortunate in the different communities I was in, whether it was the jobs that I had or the learning environments that I was in at the different universities I attended. I just had very caring people. They cared about me as a person. They worked with me with my schedule. They knew that I needed a couple of days off during the week so that I could be present with him, that I couldn't really work weekends. So even beyond my family, I definitely had a support system. My brother was 16 when I had Christian. So he was there, he was present, making sacrifices. Because sometimes people don't talk about the sibling who also is around and has to make sacrifices in their own life to be present and help. My brother and I are very close now. And even then, we were close in a different way, but just him being present there. And then I even remember being in undergrad and I had a professor, her name was Jackie, and I had to go take a final and I didn't have childcare that day. And I had to bring my son. And I remember her putting him on her back and they jumped and ran around the room, this big auditorium, while I took my final. I just was blessed to have family, friends, faculty members, colleagues. I just was surrounded with a strong community of people who believed in me, believed in my son, and wanted the best for us and supported us. I think, too, let me be very clear. I worked really hard. I often had 2 or 3 jobs at the same time while going to school. But again, that wasn't rooted in a have to. It was more rooted in I'm going to prove to you, right? So there's a difference there. Even though my parents were divorced when I was young, I come from households where I had my own bedroom. I had books in my house. I had computers and internet. I had televisions. I had cars in the driveway. I had resources. I do not come from an impoverished community where teen pregnancy might be a normal thing. That's why it was also so disorienting for people around me, right? It doesn't mean it wasn't hard, but I also don't want to make it appear like it was so desperate or that I was in such a terrible situation. I did work hard. I did receive public assistance when I needed it. When we were living on our own, I lived for the first year with my mom, and then after that had my own apartment. And my dad helped support me in my apartment and giving me money to support me to be able to live on my own as well as my mom did. So I came from a supportive network of people. And I also had people help me raise my son. I always tell people I was a single mom in the sense of I wasn't in a relationship, but I wasn't an only parent. Those are two
Yeah.
totally different things.
That's so lovely. It's so nice and refreshing to hear that people stood by you, especially your family. You mentioned the values that your mom instilled in you around service. What other values evolved at that time as a young mom? How did that
Yeah.
shape your belief system, your worldview as you stepped into grad school and work?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm thinking about back on that time, and my mom wanted so bad for me to have some normalcy as a young person, as an 18 to 24, 25-year old, as I'm navigating college and career. And she's just, you should go out to dinner, and you should do this, and you should. She just always wanted me to have some normalcy. And I very much fought it. I fought it for a long time. I was like, nope. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to be focused. I'm going to take care of Christian. This is my life. This is what I'm going to do. And yeah, so I think one of my values was definitely hard work. Hard work. And hard work probably looked like almost a toxic level of hard work. Like I definitely was going to be the last one to leave, stay up the latest, get the work done. That's just who I was. I'd say another value that kind of formed at that time was risk taking and belief. I don't know that high school Gina, before my son, would have believed in college Gina the way that I did having my son. So once I was living really for him, there were things that I was just willing to say, to do, to lean into as a leader. Now, I told you I had all these leadership roles in high school, but I felt like it was something that I just did. I don't know that it was actually who I was. I think I became more confident in my leadership and became more confident in who I was as a person as I navigated college. And then I would say another positive value was just I definitely ebbed and flowed through my faith walk. That part of me was 100% normal for a typical 20 something, questioning everything related to God and who he was. I was still faithfully attending church and stuff like that, but it was more out of habit and obedience to honor my parents, not necessarily because I had an actual deeply formed relationship. I think I was doing things out of behavior and habit and obedience, but I was on this journey of faith. Like, who am I and who am I in God's eye? And then everything wasn't great. Everything wasn't great. I'm not going to be on this call and paint it like it
An easy
was,
walk.
I made all the right choices. I used to have a blog. I don't have it anymore. I used to have a blog called Growing Up Raising Christian because I was growing up. I made a lot of mistakes. I pursued relationships that weren't for me. I desperately wanted to be known, I think, by a man, to be loved and to be cared for and cherished. Like I said, I was a workaholic. I would barely sleep and I would try to be present for everything for Christian as well as everything that was expected for me and all of my yeses. So I 100% was a very confused young person, but also completely normal. Because I think if you ask most people when they were in their 20s, what were they doing and who were they? And they'd be like,
You don't know who you are at that age. It's all
yeah,
evolving at that time, shaping up. Very few know who they are or what they want to do, but that also evolves. It's a very normal phase in any young adult to go through that. And even with
yeah,
faith, I think that's also a time that gets tested. So it's not easy. Nobody knows at that age, and you were still figuring it out. But the values that you're talking about, those very few young adults are really connected that deeply to those values, or any value
mm-hmm,
for that matter, to identify within themselves. So that's a huge
mm-hmm,
win, I think. And I think that's what kept you so focused as well.
yeah.
Did you take a break from school, from high school to college, undergrad, or you just went straight into it?
No, Gina, the crazy performer. So I had my son in July. I started school in August and went straight through. I actually almost finished early, but I went through for 4 years with my undergraduate degree. And then I took a year and did AmeriCorps locally. And then I went to graduate school for 3 years and earned two master's degrees. And then at the end, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. So the first 7 years of my son's life, I was in school of some sort, learning and leaning in. Yeah.
Wow. Was it local?
The first one was. The second one was a little bit over an hour commute to and from every day. So I was in the car anywhere between 2.5 to sometimes, depending on weather or in traffic, it could be up to 3 hours. But very, again, that's that community part. I was very strategic with my schedule. I would try to only be there 3 days a week, if not four, so that I was home a day where I could take him to school and pick him up and then also be home on the weekends. The challenge was the days that I was gone, he was going to either my mom's house or my aunt and uncle's house at 6 a.m. And then I wasn't picking him up until 9 or 10 p.m. because I was doing super long days so that I didn't have to. But he slept in his own bed in my apartment or my house every time. So, yeah.
Wow. So tell
Yeah.
me, now this journey, you said you stepped into leadership roles pretty early in life.
I
And
did.
what was that journey like when you stepped into a new position, coming back, coming with a child? Did that have any impact
Mhm.
on the job or in the way you were perceived?
Yeah. So, ironically, I think I got most of my leadership roles, whether volunteer as being a member of boards or paid roles, because of it, to be quite honest. I always joked and said I checked a lot of boxes, right? So I was a teen mom, I was a woman of color, I was a woman. I was young, right? So there was a lot of reasons why people asked me to sit at certain tables and to serve in different capacities. And so the leadership experiences I had, actually, I probably got more of them because of this journey. Then I would also say in the work that I chose to do, so you had mentioned a little bit earlier that I'm a social worker, I was deeply formed and maybe even transformed by my pregnancy and parenting of my oldest son. I wanted to do nothing but serve young people, to identify ways to especially serve the young people who are the good kids. I felt like that was who I was. Now, granted, I became pregnant my senior year, but I didn't have a whole bunch of boyfriends or was in a whole bunch of relationships or was promiscuous or anything like that. I made a decision and I got pregnant. But I definitely was one of the like good kids who nobody really pays attention to. They just expect that they're going to show up well. And I think a lot of times in our traditional school systems and in programs or services that we have for young people, the kids who are not necessarily at risk for anything or aren't behaving in a certain way or aren't necessarily super gifted, whether it's gifted academically or gifted in athletics, there's a big swath of kids that are in the middle that nobody really pays attention to. And so having my son, people kept asking, like, how did this happen to you? How did this happen to you? How did this happen to you? And I'm like, I made a choice that actually a lot of people my age were making the same choice. I just happened to get caught and have my
Right.
child and raise him. But what was I seeking? What was I searching for? And I think it was just like love and relationship. And I made a choice. I made a decision, right? I don't regret anything of it. I don't ever wonder what could have been. I've never, ever in the history of my life been like, I wonder what my life could have been if I didn't have Christian. Ever. I can say that firmly. I have wondered for him, what would his life have been if I would have waited later? I wonder for him what formational things have become a part of his life just by accident because his mom was 18 and didn't know what she was doing. I wonder for him what good has come out of his life because he was raised by a young hustler who like just wanted to make sure she was doing good work. So I just became deeply passionate about serving young people. And that's how I ended up with social work as my degree program and focused on public administration because I want to make organizations better and I want to make the world better for the next generation. And I want to do everything possible to serve young people so that they could be the leaders that they're called to be right now, that they don't have to wait. The good thing about me having Christian was I became a little bit of a bully because I was like, I don't have to wait for you to give me permission to lead. I'm going to lead. And I just want young people to know that they can do those things and that they just have somebody like me believing in them.
I'd like to dig into that. A lot of people struggle with that, to cross that
Mm-hmm.
barrier. How did you adapt to that thinking? Was it just because you had role models in your life, or you actually intentionally sat and thought through these things and then decided that you're not going to play the victim card and just be a hustler
Yeah.
and go for it?
Yeah. Remember, I was trying to prove
Mm.
everybody wrong. So part of it was I was just stubborn and I just didn't care what other barriers were in my way. So some of it was just ignorance, right? I just wasn't acutely aware. So that's one thing. The second thing is, remember, I'm a social worker. So I do genuinely believe that there are times when people are truly victims of their situation, and victims meaning that they have no control over what's happening in to them or around them. They have no control over it and they have never
Yes.
seen different. So both of my parents were professionals. Both of my parents were the first ones in their positions in many ways, as in people of color. They didn't talk to us about it necessarily, but I knew that there are some things that they encountered, some hardships that they encountered, some hardships that they overcame that ingrained in us that we could do hard things, that my brother and I could do hard things. And I also think like just even though there was a season of my life where I was only going to church out of habit or obedience, that faithfulness ended up serving me incredibly well later. Knowing that there is more beyond you, that you are not the beginning and end of anything, that there is someone, some power working through you. So, like that for me also helps me see how small I am in this world. Sometimes we get so stuck on posture and influence and title, just never have been one to do that. And so one of the ways I share this with people is I've had different positions I've held, and people will find out about my degrees, or they'll find out about titles I've had, or they'll find out about things, prizes I've won, or awards I've won, and stuff like that, or places I've visited or served. And they'll say, I didn't know that about you. You didn't tell anybody that. I'm like, it's not relevant. It's not relevant. And it doesn't mean you don't celebrate those things. It doesn't mean they're not found somewhere that somebody could find them out. What it does mean is, what do you lead with? I lead with loving people. I lead with caring about the person and the next step for them. And I haven't always gotten it right. But I think in this season of my life, I'm doing a lot better than I ever did before.
Yeah. It also sounds like a lot of things evolved for you during that time, right? Whether it was your faith walk, which you mentioned was in that ebb and flow. But now
Mhm.
it sounds like by this stage in your life, you had evolved with that. Even as a leader,
Yep.
it seemed like you had come to a place of acceptance of how it is going to be. Were there any times when you felt challenged at work, like that, or in your leadership
Oh,
positions, that you were doubted
yes.
because of your age or your decisions?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So how did
Oh,
you deal
yes.
with that?
Yeah, I had different employment experiences where I would be asked to do or lead something often. And at one point in time, I had all of these people against me, just saying untrue things. And I felt very misunderstood. And I'm like, what did I do? What did I do? And the reality was that they didn't like the leader of the organization. So anybody that appeared to be in obedience to this leader or for this leader, they also did not like. And for me, again, here's that accountability outcomes consequence thing, right? For me, it was like, okay, then quit and get another job, or stay and be on board. Right. Like for me, some things I think I might make too simplistic. Right. I was just very black and white about it as far as the experience went. And it actually led to a very transformational moment in my own leadership journey. When I tell you that people did not like this leader, they were gunning for his throat, meaning there was a coup to remove him from his position. That's how big this got. And I remember being in the room and saying, we were being interviewed by his boss, right? So there's a room full of people and we're being interviewed. And I didn't agree with everything he did. I didn't agree with all of his tactics. I didn't agree with the way he talked to people or even treated me. But my posture was that this group of people isn't coming together for the betterment of the organization. This group of people is coming against a leader because they don't agree with his ways. And instead of having thoughtful conversations with him and having a civil discourse, you've taken this route. And you are actually, and I was the youngest person on staff. I'm like, you're not mentoring me. You're not leading me in a way that makes me feel even hopeful if he were to leave, because you remain. And that means that your voice is going to be the loud one. That means this situation is going to continue because you're not showing me strong leadership. And I didn't say it necessarily in that way, but that's that. I remember articulating that I didn't know that being on that team or on that staff was going to be this outcome. And I felt so isolated again and so alone. And I remember a couple of people were like, that was so brave of you to say, and apologize to me for the way that they had behaved and how it had impacted me, because I was being treated like trash and I wasn't doing anything but my job. And so, yeah, that was a transformational moment for me because I had been afraid for a long time to speak up in that environment that was getting pretty toxic. And again, it wasn't a side for me, it was I was doing my job and then I was being punished by my colleagues for it. But then there's been other examples of knowing when you should speak up versus when you shouldn't. I'm all about being authentically myself. And sometimes that's not necessary. Sometimes it's just let things happen as they will and it'll work out. I would say for me, people who are attracted to me, who like me, who are in relationship with me, appreciate my authenticity, appreciate my humor, appreciate my desire to journey with them well and for them to journey with me. People who usually don't understand me, are afraid of my authenticity and think my humor might be disrespectful, right? Because it's, oh, she's so jokey. And that's not necessarily the case. I actually can be deeply passionate and deeply present with people. I've just learned to release that. I've learned to release it, and not in a way that dismisses people's feedback, but in a way that's what it needs to be for me is for me.
Tell
So,
me about a time
yeah.
when you had to hold yourself back and you thought that was the wise decision. It's a hard one. It's one of the hardest things to do.
Hmm. Yeah, a time where I held myself back. I would say probably in the last 10 years, there have been opportunities and moments where I felt maybe it's not even holding back as much it was releasing the need to control the narrative or the situation or the outcomes. And I have had the privilege of leading different teams and different organizations through significant transition. Sometimes as a consultant, sometimes as a part of staff, sometimes just by way of coaching the leader who is facilitating it. And there was a particular time where there was a part of me that was like, I probably need to say more so that people understand, people have perspective, people know what's going on. And there's a quote that John Maxwell has said in the past: your legacy, it's something that lives beyond you, it doesn't live because of you. And I realized in that season, and it was multiple organizations at the same time that I was walking with, where transition was happening. And I think in a post COVID world, there's going to be a lot of
Yeah.
transition just over and
Yeah.
over again. Right. And just releasing the need to control the narrative, releasing the need to control the way, showed me what legacy really looks like. And if you've done the work, if you've been intentional and integrous, it all works out in the end. It all works out in the end. Now, you usually don't see it until a little while later, right? You don't see it till you check back in, or maybe you never check in, you just hear about it. But yeah, that I would say leading teams and organizations through change have been probably the most significant times where I've had to hold back, lead from my strength, but also hold back in holding control or the narrative over
Mhm.
anything.
What would you say to somebody who wants to level up in that skill?
If somebody wanted to level up in the power of releasing, I think it requires a humility that you can only practice by doing. And Stephen Covey teaches about like the circles of control, the circles of influence, the circles of concern. Dr. Tim Elmore teaches a similar thought about the buckets. And I think, especially the higher in leadership you go, the more often this happens, is that we feel the need to control so that we can protect, whether it's our staff or ourselves, from the potential outcomes that could await us, right? One of the things that, so remember, I used to be someone who definitely wanted to outwork, to outdo everything so that I could prove everybody wrong, because I had this narrative in my mind that I wasn't going to reach my goals. I wasn't going to do the things that I had in my heart, because now I was a parent and I couldn't parent and do those things at the same time. What that does create is a little bit of a perfectionist spirit and a little bit of control spirit, right? It creates the desire to control things, the desire to make things right, because it has to fit into the narrative you're trying to tell everybody, which is that you can succeed, you can achieve, you can do all those things. So as I got into different levels of leadership, broader levels of influence, serving more people, caring for more people, I realized how important it was to release more. One, because there's no way that I can actually do the thing that God's called me to do if I'm the one doing all the work. There has to be multiplication. There has to be a way for this to live beyond me. The other thing that I was realizing was, is if I don't release it, then it might suffocate me. it might destroy everything that I've spent so long trying to build or to do to serve people. It's like the martyr spirit in some ways. It's like we tell ourselves we're doing it for somebody else's good, but really we're controlling it for
Mm.
our own. And I just had to learn how to release it. I had to learn how to let it go. Now, fortunately, for probably the people that I was leading, I was also learning that lesson in parenting at the same time, right? So when Christian's graduating from high school, and even before he graduated from high school, he's deciding what college to go to. He's deciding who to date. There's all these things that are happening in his life. And there's things that I can have influence on, and there's things that I can't. There's things that I have to release. And no matter how much good I want for him, he's his own person and he has to make his own way. It's similarly with work and the people that we lead. You can only do so much, and then you have to release it so that it can go and do good and multiply. So I think the practice of it, you have to practice releasing it. You have to put things in the proper buckets. What are things that you can control? What are things that should be in your circle of influence? What are things that should be in your circle of concern? And then once you identify where they live, you figure out how you show up in those spaces so that they can do what they're supposed to do.
You seem to be a very well aware person, of self aware, right? What did you practice for it to get so enhanced?
Yeah. I would say, again, back to my pregnancy, I've probably been some form of self aware most of my life. But I would say, having my first son, I realized that I can't hide it. Everybody knows I'm pregnant, everybody knows I'm having a baby. So I can't hide it. I can't lie about it. I just got to tell the truth, right? I think when you have a situation that happens in your life where you can't hide. I think sometimes people
Yeah.
try to and think that they're not as telling as they are. But I think when you have a situation like that, you can either run from it or you can lean into it. And I just chose to lean into it. That's been my personality. So then over the years, I've learned how to be a better version of myself year over year, I think. It's always weird when you do interviews like this, right? Because I don't want to come off as like I'm all knowing and so super positive. It's never been all consistently great, right? It has been a journey that I'm grateful for and that I am happy that I've had the privilege to live. But yeah, so then I just lean in to the next thing. And there's things that have been very hard lessons. There's also things that are just like private, that are just things that you go through, that you learn from, and that you just grow from. And then there's just things that you have to address, and you find that being your best self includes believing in your whole story, not just parts of it that
Yeah.
make you
No,
feel
you
good.
mentioned a very important point that a lot of people hide it, which is actually the norm, I would say, rather than
Yeah.
leaning into
Mhm.
it because it's hard. It confronts you. It's so confrontational to
Yeah.
address, to identify. We all know our weaknesses. We all know that these are things that we need to work on. This is something that I need to get better at.
Mhm.
But to have the courage to say it out loud to ourselves and to
Mhm.
others, it's not easy to be in that space. So a lot of maturity, and I'm seeing a lot of optimistic outlook,
Oh,
that
yeah.
mindset
For sure.
of
For sure.
always looking at the good of things and how we can make it better. So this Gina that we are here today
Yeah.
with, if that Gina had to say something to that young Gina who found
Mm.
that pregnant, when she was alone, when the world started passing their judgment on that young Gina, what
Yeah.
would you say to her?
Whew, so many things. I would say believe your mom. Believe your mom that it's going to be okay and that she's got your back. Know that you're actually going to do more than you thought you ever would, because you have a drive in you and someone that you're living for, that he himself is going to open so many doors for you because you just want to do well for him. That your dad and your stepmom and your grandma love you deeply, and that they're just afraid. They're just afraid for your future and they don't want to see you struggle. Hold close your mentors. Hold close your mentors. You are going to experience a life full of mentorship that most people never have the opportunity. And every step of the way, you're going to have a mentor. Every single moment in your life, you're going to look back and you're going to see where somebody mentored you, somebody said yes to your dreams, somebody said yes to open doors for you. And journal, because you're still going to struggle with it at 45, but you should really try to journal because you're going to want to remember this crazy ride of a life that you've had the pleasure of living. And then I think the last thing I would say is that rest is holy. Rest is holy. And there's not enough work that you can do to earn anybody's respect, anybody's forgiveness, anybody's approval, or even your way into the kingdom. Rest is holy. Love yourself and your body in a way that honors it and allows you to do this life for even longer than you can expect. And then also, you will get married one day. You're going to hate men for a while, but you're going to get married one day. And he is going to be an amazing husband who loves you deeply and gives you another little boy who is hysterical and super smart and loves Jesus deeply. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds so amazing. And so comforting, that young Gina. If you had a choice to rewrite a
Mm-hmm.
narrative around teen moms, what would you want people to understand about teen moms and their lives? And what narrative would you like to help construct?
Yeah. Here's one thing I would say about all the way that we view everybody in the next generation. One is that the generations behind us are very different than any of us have ever been. They have grown up with technology almost coming out of the womb and have had to deal with poor decision making of us as adults in ways that we never truly had to deal with when we were their age. Access to so much information that we learned at certain phases of life that we are now trying to hold them accountable to. We're like, oh, they learned that so young. We didn't learn that young. So I think a misnomer about young people is that they're like either disrespectful or a belief that young people think they know it all. I don't think that's the case. I think this generation very much pays attention to everything that we're doing because they have access to see it all the time. And we're not doing a great job. We're not doing a great job as adults raising kids. We're just not. We are giving young people too much access to too much too quickly. And then we hold them accountable for it. That is the most asinine and ridiculous thing I've ever witnessed. There are very few adults taking responsibility for their behaviors as parents and as leaders in our community. And we need to do better. We need to do better. So before we start chastising young people, we need to look in the mirror and take accountability for what we're not doing and for what we are doing for them and to them. I think the other thing is that whether it's a teen mom or any young person, I think too often we count people out based off of one decision or a thing that they've done. And we don't look at our own lives and say, but for the grace of God. I'm just saying that we often are quick to judge. We're quick to make a comment. We're quick to have questions or wonder. It's just unnecessary. It's unnecessary. I think we need to do a lot more walking with instead of judging people. Young people, I've been fortunate to be in community with a lot of young leaders. They're so dynamic, so dynamic. But also, my posture is that because I'm looking for them to be dynamic. I expect them to be dynamic. I expect them to be great leaders. I expect them to care about their world. I expect them to love one another. I expect them to respect their teachers, to be compassionate to the elderly. I expect that from them. So guess what they do? They show up.
John is famous for saying this, right? That if we start treating people the way that we want them to be, they
Yep.
start showing up.
Yeah. I'm not teaching them. I'm asking questions. I'm walking with them. I'm exploring life with them. And they're the ones that are offering the insight and the wisdom and the
Lovely.
care. So I think sometimes we just dismiss young people. And having been a young person who is dismissed and made space for myself at sometimes my own table, I just think I have a way to look at them that I wish that most of us did a little bit more of.
They're really smart kids. I teach
Yeah.
undergrad. Some of them are so good. They
Yeah.
have so much potential. It's just that they need
Yeah.
that person, somebody to believe in them. They are at
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
stage when they are still exploring
Yeah.
themselves, and somebody to just give them a feedback and say something nice and positive about them. They need it. They need
Hmm.
that. What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I think I'm most proud of parenting. I think I'm most proud of my family relationships, which includes me parenting, my marriage, and then the relationship I have within my family. My brother and I actually just started over a year ago, but we meet every Wednesday morning at 5:30 a.m. and we talk to each other and we pray for one another and we just check in with each other. It's like our weekly date. And I think as we get older, sometimes we walk away from those relationships that kept us centered, and we only end up coming back together in relationship with each other out of tragedy or out of need. And my brother and I just were like, that will not be us. So we shall meet every Wednesday at 5:30 a.m. Maybe 5:30 a.m. isn't your time, but I think you should figure out ways to be connected to those who matter the most to you. My marriage with my husband, we both got married older in life compared to certain standards, and then had our son, and we've had our ups and downs and experienced a lot of good and a lot of hard together, but I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our marriage and that we're choosing every day to be in it with and for each other. And then parenting, I'm mostly confused because I have a 27-year-old I'm talking about insurance with, and I have a 7-year-old who I'm playing Hot Wheels with. So I often talk about parenting across generations. I literally am, but my kids are my joy. I call them my sunshines, and they bring so much joy to me. And I am so grateful that God saw fit to make me their mom. Yeah.
Beautiful. How do you look back at it all?
Yeah. I said earlier, I don't live in regret. I don't live in regret. I live with a hopeful, optimistic spirit that it will all be good, used for good, and nothing will be wasted. That doesn't mean you just go around haphazardly living your life, but you said earlier when we first joined together about living two lives, and I would say I've probably lived about 10. I have not always been this person, and I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. And when I look over it all, I typically sit in awe of what I've been allowed to do, what is yet before me, and just with a spirit of gratitude that, again, because I work really hard to be deeply rooted in faith, that my belief is that I'm just a small part of a very big world. And if that's the case, then I don't have to be the one used to do this work. I get to be the one used to do this work. And sometimes the work is laundry. Sometimes the work is being on an international stage. And sometimes the work is having a one on one conversation with a young person who just wants somebody to believe in them. So I get to do it all.
What would be your one message or advice that you would like to give a teen mom who either is heard the news that she's pregnant or
Yeah.
she's going through that journey? And what would
Hmm.
be a message for a young leader who is in a room, she's still figuring out her role and is probably doubting themselves? What
Yeah.
would you say to them?
Yeah. So to the teen mom, I would say don't be too proud to ask for help. There are plenty of people, there are plenty of resources available that can help you. Now, in particular, I'm talking about the US. So if you're watching from another community outside of the US, then we'd have to do a little bit more research. But do not be too proud. Do not be too proud. I was working multiple jobs and receiving even help from my family, and sometimes it wasn't enough. And so I needed help and I got it. I also had a plan to not receive help. I did both. So I think it's not being too proud to ask for help And help looks like a lot of different things. Sometimes help is somebody helping you load your car with groceries. Sometimes help is a friend saying, "Hey, I'll come over and do laundry with you." Sometimes help is signing up for public assistance. Sometimes help is finding a way to go earn a certificate or get better in a particular skill so that you can provide for yourself and your family beyond that. Sometimes help is putting your baby up for adoption. There's so many ways that you can get help, and your life continues to matter. It's not about the moment, it's about who you are and who you're called to be. It might not feel like it right now, but if you lean in, all things can work out for good. To the young leader, in particular a woman in leadership, I would say to you is pay attention. Pay attention, be a noticer, be mindful of the room. Are you the only one in the room? Is there a way for you to make space for another one of you in the room? You giving compliments or making space for others does not take away from who you are and what space you take up. Pride yourself on leaning in with curiosity. Don't make assumptions about why you're the only one in the room, but also make space for others to come into the room. I can't tell you how many women in my younger part of my career did not make space for me in the room, actually did everything to keep me in my place in other rooms. But as I got older, I was fortunate enough to be mentored by people who saw me, wanted to add value to me, and ensured that I knew my worth and that I would find ways to add value to others. There's a place for you. You just got to find out where it is and use your skills to make sure that you're amplifying that good in the community where you lead. Yeah.
Beautiful. What a lovely note to end at, I think.
Thank you. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Gina. Thank you for your time and for this
Yes.
lovely conversation. So much I'm still digesting it all.
My butt. Thanks, Rita.